Hi friends, welcome back to the Plain Fun RC channel. It's your host, Saul. So let's talk about what we're looking at here. We are working on attaching the winglets. This is a very intricate process. One of the first things we need to do is we need to make sure we cut a route, a path for the lead all the way through to the center, much like we did for the aileron servo. Now, because the lead exits here, it would make common sense just to route a path on the top of the wing all the way through to there. However, there's one major problem. The canopy is going to sit on top, and there's going to be railings along here, along both sides, and therefore that won't work because it'll make it very difficult to get the lead out if I ever need to replace the servo. So after giving this a little thought, what we're going to do is we're going to cut a small notch here to pass the lead down through the bottom of the wing so it exits out the bottom here. And then we're going to route a gap along the bottom portion of the wing. Okay, so I'm going to mark that off. We're going to make the cut. And once that's done, then we can get to attaching the winglet. All right, more to come. All right, friends, continuing with our update here. I want to take a moment to get a shot of the instructions for attaching the winglets to the wingtips. In case you don't have a copy of the instructions out there, hit pause at any point to read them. And let me also get you a shot of one more page, an important page. This deals with measurements. So if anyone out there is building this plane or something similar, here's some important measurements to keep in mind. And make sure the rudder is taped in place on the winglet. All right, friends, more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update with regards to attaching the winglet to the wingtip, let's talk about what we got going on here. So you'll see, once again, we're looking at the wing upside down. Same blue tape that we used, except this time we're running the wire for the servo and the winglet. Now, one thing you'll have to do is you will have to cut a notch here from the bottom through the top. Just a small notch, just big enough to accommodate the plug. That's all. So the plug can pass through the wing. Once again, we're using the cutting tool from Dremel, and we're just creating our little channel here. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to tuck in our wire, make sure everything's working okay. Now, the one thing I want to make you aware of is for the extension, you're going to need a 24-inch. This might be actually, this is 24 actually. 24-inch extension, and that's all you'll need because that'll give you more than enough so that the lead will come out in the center, and then you can always add another extension onto the end of that once the wing is attached to the fuselage. All right, more to come. All right, friends, we're looking at the bottom portion of our right wing, and you can see how nice and neat we've got our wire tucked in our channel, and we've got just enough extension in the middle so that way we can attach an extension once the wing is attached to the fuselage. All right, we're gonna go ahead and focus on the left side, and more to come. All right, friends, we're looking at the bottom left of the wing, bottom left wing. Let me show you what we got going on. Of course, we got our tape to guide us, and this is the notch I was talking about previously that you need to cut on the end. This is just big enough to accommodate the servo plug, so it'll pass through the bottom of the wing. All right, we're gonna take our Dremel, we're gonna create our rut or route it out so we can fit our wire. More to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update here, we have our slot routed out. Once again, using our Dremel tool, and you can see it's perfect. Worked really well. So now that we've got that in place, now we can go ahead and focus on mounting the winglets onto the wingtips. So that's done, and more to come. All right, friends, continuing our update here of attaching the winglet. Let's talk about what we have going on here right now. So, a couple things. First of all, this definitely takes quite a while to get this set because, you know, we've got all these measurements here that you have to be precise. So that's the biggest issue. And, you know, you're going to need some T-pins, as you can see here. And I strongly recommend 5-minute epoxy. Now you'll notice when we look here, let me zoom in a little bit. Notice the fairly large gap up front. That'll have to be filled in. And that was because when going through and trying to set the measurement, that ran from X all the way to A, it actually required going through and taking the fin and moving the leading edge out a little bit. Everything else is set perfectly, thank goodness. Anyways, T-pins are needed, especially one right up front here. Now, the important thing to keep in mind is that when you're measuring the distance from here to point, let me show you on the diagram, from Y to A, just a friendly reminder, when setting that distance, which is what this little right angle represents, you've got to go from the foremost leading edge, which is right there. You can see it right where the block here meets the foam. That little forward leading edge represents the point. Okay, so keep that in mind because that's the most important right there. Okay, that has to be set first, and then all the other measurements can then be taken. So anyway, we're gonna let that sit fully overnight. Even though this you can handle the part after about 20 minutes, I want that fully cured. And then we're gonna really focus on going through and filling in the gap up front with some epoxy. Now that notch there, as I mentioned before, that's just for the wire coming out of the winglet. All right, we're gonna let that sit, fill that in. Once that's done, then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna focus on our right winglet and use the same technique. But she's looking great though. Look at that, look how nice that looks. You know, coming along. All right, more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update with regards to attaching the winglet to the wing, let's talk about what we have here. So as I mentioned before, there was that rather large gap. You can actually see it right through there. Anyway, I debated maybe just putting in some pieces of 1/16 balsa in the gap down below. But then I realized, I said, well, I'm going to run a piece of glass here on the bottom and on the top. So when I run the glass with the 5-minute epoxy, let it dry, then what I'll do is I'll feed the epoxy through the top and fill in that gap that way. And then this dried fiberglass down here will catch the excess epoxy, and that'll allow me to fill in the gap. So that's what we've done. We're letting this dry. We just did some 3/4 ounce, just something light is all we need. Just something that'll help seal the gap on the bottom so the epoxy doesn't come dripping out. All right, more to come. Hi friends, as we continue our update here with the winglet, we're looking at the left winglet. Let me back off a little bit so you can see what we're looking at here. We've got the wing upright. What we did is, as I mentioned previously, I took a 5-minute epoxy and I filled in that large gap that was right down in there. Filled it up until the epoxy started to overflow. So having that piece of fiberglass underneath helped to contain the epoxy. And then let that dry. And then what I did is went ahead and put on some fiberglass, about an inch this way and about an inch up roughly, to help go ahead and provide some additional reinforcement here. So we're gonna go ahead, let that sit, let that dry, and then we're gonna move on to the right side and then get that other winglet on. And when we're done putting the winglets on, then we'll go ahead, we'll add our filler piece right here to help fill in this little part, and then the winglets will be 100% done. All right, more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update here, we're looking at the right winglet. We've gone ahead, we used some blue tape to help hold the angles in place. There's quite a bit of a gap, as you can see there. Let me try to get as best I can There we go. Rather large gap. So we were only able to put the glue on the spar and on the trailing edge right back there where you see the pin. That's fine. That'll hold it in place enough, and then we'll use the same technique that we did on the left, where we'll flip the wing over, we'll put a glass at the bottom where it joins, we'll put some epoxy in the gap to help fill it in, and let it dry, then flip it back over and fill up that gap with some epoxy, and then glass the top. All right, so we've got that in place. We're gonna let that sit for a full 24 hours, but we're moving along. Very happy with the results so far. So, more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update here with regards to attaching the winglet, you can see here that we have the right wing upside down here, and what we did, we went ahead, much like we did with the left wing, you can see we've gone through and we have run the fiberglass along here, extending up the side of the winglet, bottom of the winglet, so that we were able to fill in this gap, and then we're going to flip it back over and fill in that large gap that we had with epoxy. And then we'll put another piece of fiberglass. We'll put a piece of fiberglass on top. One of the nice things about it too is you'll notice here I covered up some of the routed part for the wire. Actually, this is going to work fine. I am going to go ahead, just a quick mention, I am going to go ahead and wind up running 3/4 ounce fiberglass over these routed areas here and here, because I found that especially right here towards the thinner portion of the wing, there was a great deal of flex after making this route. So we're going to have to run some 3/4 ounce, and I'm just going to have to go ahead and cover it up. And if I ever have to change the servo out, I'll just have to make a slice along that particular fiberglass, take the servo out, put a new one in, and then just refiberglass it all over again. So anyway, that's where we are at this time. So let's go ahead and fill in that gap. More to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update here, we're looking at the right winglet, and you can see we've got our fiberglass over top. And of course, as I mentioned previously, prior to putting the fiberglass on, we filled in that area with some 5-minute epoxy. So that's drying. We'll let that dry overnight, then we'll trim off the excess. And basically attaching the winglets is done, except for this little tiny portion up here that needs to be filled in with a little wood, but basically it's done. So there we go. That's attaching the winglets. Now we're going to shift our focus to going through and hinging the rudders onto the winglets, and then going through, and we are going to go ahead and glass our ailerons. I know initially said I wouldn't do it, but the problem is when you look here at the plans, look at how the hinge sits. Because it's so close to the surface, you could really just split that wood. And I discovered that when I was hinging the canard to the elevator. Thank goodness that they were both glassed, because they really helped to prevent the wood from splitting. So we're going to work on that. We're just going to do a single layer on the top, single layer on the bottom of 3/4 ounce fiberglass. Okay, all right, more to come.